And the Federal Reserve took aggressive action to tackle inflation with a rate increase of 0.75 percentage point. It is the latest effort to control inflation without causing a recession, as prices from gas, groceries, rent, mortgages, they all skyrocket. So for more on this and how the Biden administration is reacting, let us bring in Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cordes. Hey, Nancy. So a little over 2 weeks ago, the president shared his plan to tackle inflation. What action has the administration taken so far, though?
Well, the principal action we've seen so far, Anne Marie, is the president sending a sternly worded letter to oil refiners and producers in this country, demanding that they explain to him why they aren't producing at full capacity, and outlining why it's so critical to the American people that they actually get gas prices down. But, obviously a sternly worded letter is not going to do much to lower inflation in the near term. The challenge is that a lot of the low-hanging fruit, the things that the White House can do to tackle inflation, it's already done. It's already tapped into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It has loosened ethanol restrictions for the summer. Officials have convened major retailers and manufacturers to try to smooth out some of the supply chain issues. But at this point, the big things that the president wants to do would require acts of Congress. We're talking about things like bringing down the cost of child care, or establishing universal pre-K, or even allowing Americans to negotiate for prescription drugs. These are all things that everyone acknowledges would probably lower some prices significantly for Americans. But right now, he does not have the votes.
The things that he can do, the options that they're limited, but that doesn't matter to the American people. They want to know, when are they going to get a break, and what is their president doing? And sometimes it's just a matter of messaging, because the truth is, he can't make OPEC pump out more crude. He can't, stop the supply. He can't sort of stop Shanghai from shutting down if there are 2 or 3 COVID cases. These things are not within his control. So I'm curious about the messaging coming out of the White House, the rhetoric. Has it changed about who's to blame for the place that we see ourselves now?
I don't know if the messaging about who's to blame has changed that much. The president has been saying for a while that this is Vladimir Putin's price hike. He's been blaming the war in Ukraine, COVID, supply chain issues, and all the rest. I think what has changed is the fact that he's not sugarcoating it anymore. When he goes out on the road, he talks very bluntly about the pain that American families are feeling right now. He doesn't try to argue, we're turning the corner right now. The White House knows that that would appear to be a little out of touch. They know that American families are still paying hundreds of dollars more per month than they were at this time last year for the same goods. So he's very frank about it. I think that, what you describe, the need to show that they're doing something, is the reason why this White House is willing to take something of a PR hit to hold a meeting in Saudi Arabia next month with the Crown Prince, someone who President Biden formerly said he wanted to make a pariah. He's not meeting not just with Saudi Arabian leaders, but with leaders of all the oil-producing nations in that region to urge them to produce more. And the belief is that the White House wouldn't have made this decision to go ahead and convene that meeting in Saudi Arabia and take the hit unless they believe that something concrete was going to come out of it in terms of those nations agreeing to pump more oil. So we're watching to see what happens when he heads to the Middle East at the end of next month.
We're also getting reports that the president is weighing whether or not to roll back certain tariffs imposed on Chinese goods in an effort to fight rising prices. What are the potential pros and cons of doing something like that?
So the pros are that it would likely bring down the cost of some Chinese imports and potentially pretty quickly. The question is whether those prices would come down enough to really have it be worth the trade-offs. The big trade-offs being, first of all, that the country is in a rocky relationship with China right now, doesn't feel like the time to be rewarding them by reducing these tariffs. And then, it could encourage companies to keep their supply chains in China instead of shifting them back here to the United States if they can start selling their goods without those tariffs imposed again. So those are the the trade-offs that the White House is weighing right now as they decide whether the president will roll back some or all of these tariffs that were imposed by President Trump.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I mean, the impact will be felt on the American public based on the products. If he picks the right products, if it's, I don't know, refrigerators and everyone needs a new refrigerator, it can make a huge difference. If he picks products that people don't care whether they buy or not, it might not change the way people feel about what he's doing for the economy. Nancy, thank you very much.
You're welcome.